"What are you doing here?" Emmanuel's voice was sharp and angry. It cut through the quiet church like a broken glass. Mama Rose sat in her wheelchair wearing her best red dress. She looked up at her son with surprise and pain in her eyes. "Emmanuel, I'm your mother," she said softly. "This is your wedding day. I told you not to come." His voice got louder. Now everyone in the fancy church was staring at them. Rich people in expensive clothes turned their heads to watch. Emmanuel's bride, Patricia, stood at the altar in her beautiful white dress. Her family looked shocked and angry. The whole church became very quiet. "Look at yourself," Emmanuel said, pointing at his mother. "Look at the wheelchair you're sitting on. You can't even walk on your own. You don't belong here with these important people. Please leave." The words hit Mama Rose like someone had punched her in the stomach. Her heart felt like it was breaking into tiny pieces. She stared at her son, the same little boy she used to hold when he was scared. The same child she had worked so hard to feed and keep safe. People in the church gasped. They whispered to each other in shock. Some took out their phones and started recording everything that was happening. "You're making me look embarrassed," Emmanuel continued. His face was red with anger and shame. "Just leave. Go back to your house and stop ruining my perfect day." Mama Rose felt tears coming to her eyes, but she didn't cry out loud. She didn't scream or shout. Instead, she sat up straight in her wheelchair with quiet strength. Even though her heart was broken, she held her head up high. "I love you, my son," she whispered. But her words were lost in all the uncomfortable sounds from the shocked guests. Mama Rose slowly turned her wheelchair around. The wheels made a small squeaking sound as she rolled toward the big church doors. With every push of her wheels, more phones recorded her slow, painful walk away. The wedding that should have been full of joy and love had become something cruel and mean. Soon the whole world would see what happened here. But what Emmanuel didn't know, what he had forgotten in his shame and anger, was the amazing story of the simple woman he had just hurt so badly. He had forgotten all the years she had given up everything for him. He had forgotten the nights she couldn't sleep because she was working. He had forgotten the love that never stopped, no matter what. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Mama Rose had not always been in a wheelchair. There was a time when she was strong and could walk anywhere she wanted. She was only 26 years old when Emmanuel's father, Peter, died suddenly in a terrible accident. It happened so fast that she couldn't believe it was real. One day Peter was there, laughing and playing with little Emmanuel. The next day he was gone forever. Emmanuel was only 7 years old then, and he cried every night for his daddy. The sadness felt like a heavy stone in Mama Rose's heart. But she had no time to sit and cry for too long. Little Emmanuel needed her more than anything in the world. In the years that followed, Rose worked harder than anyone should ever have to work. During the day she cleaned big houses for rich families. At night, she worked at an office building, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. She barely got 3 hours of sleep, but she never said it was too hard. She gave up buying new clothes for herself so Emmanuel could have school uniforms. She ate less food so there would be more for him. She walked long distances to save money on bus fare, using that money instead for Emmanuel's school books. It was so tiring, but every sacrifice felt worth it when she saw Emmanuel studying hard and getting good grades. She could see the smart, determined look in his eyes. Rose would wake up at 4 in the morning to cook breakfast for Emmanuel before he went to school. Then she would rush to her first job, cleaning the big beautiful houses of wealthy families. These families had everything: nice cars, pretty clothes, and more food than they could eat. Sometimes Rose would look around these fancy houses and dream. Maybe one day Emmanuel would live in a house like this. Maybe one day he would have everything she couldn't give him. Emmanuel will be different, she would tell herself as she scrubbed floors. He will be successful. He will have a better life than me. The rich families Rose worked for were not always kind to her. Some would speak to her like she wasn't important. They would leave big messes for her to clean and never say thank you. But Rose never complained. She just smiled, did her work, and went home to help Emmanuel with his homework. Emmanuel was a very smart boy. He got the best grades in his class. His teachers always told Rose how proud she should be. "Your son is going to be somebody important one day," they would say. Rose would smile so big when she heard this. All the hard work, all the tiredness, all the hungry nights, it was all worth it. But then, one terrible night, everything changed. It was raining very hard. Rose had just finished cleaning a big office building downtown. She was walking to the bus stop, carrying her cleaning supplies and thinking about Emmanuel's upcoming school fees. The rain made it hard to see. The street lights were dim and there were big puddles everywhere. Rose was crossing the street when she saw bright headlights coming toward her very fast. A car was speeding through the rain, and the driver wasn't paying attention. Stop. Rose tried to scream, but it was too late. The car hit Rose so hard that she flew through the air and landed on the cold, wet street. Pain shot through her whole body like lightning. She couldn't move her legs at all. People came running from everywhere. Someone called for help. Rose could hear sirens getting louder and louder. But all Rose could think about was Emmanuel. He was at home waiting for her. He was probably doing his homework and wondering why his mama was late. "My son," she whispered as the ambulance workers put her on a stretcher. "I have to take care of my son." The doctors at the hospital had bad news. The accident had hurt Rose's back very badly. The bones in her spine were broken and she would never walk again. "You'll need to use a wheelchair for the rest of your life," the doctor said sadly. Rose felt like her world was falling apart. How could she work now? How could she take care of Emmanuel? How could she clean houses and offices if she couldn't walk? But when Emmanuel came to see her in the hospital, Rose saw the fear in his young eyes. He was only 12 years old, and his mama was the only family he had left. "Don't worry, my son," Rose said, holding his hand tight. "Everything will be okay. Mama will find a way." And she did find a way. Even from her wheelchair, Rose refused to give up on Emmanuel's dreams. She learned to do small jobs she could manage while sitting down. She would sew clothes for people in the neighborhood. She would help other children with their reading for a little bit of money. It was much harder now. She made much less money than before. But Rose never let Emmanuel see her cry about it. "We're going to make it," she would tell him every day. "You're going to finish school, go to college, and become successful." Emmanuel worked hard too. He got scholarships to the best schools because his grades were so good. Rose was so proud when he got accepted to college. "See," she would say, tears of joy in her eyes. "I told you we would make it." But as Emmanuel grew older and became more successful, something began to change. When Emmanuel finished college, he got a very good job at a big company. He started making more money than Rose had ever seen in her whole life. He could buy nice clothes, a fancy car, and rent a big apartment in the expensive part of town. Rose was so happy and proud. Her son had made it. All those years of hard work had paid off. "Look at you," she would say when Emmanuel visited her small house. "My successful son." But Emmanuel's visits became less and less. At first he came every week. Then it was every 2 weeks. Then once a month. "I'm very busy at work, Mama," Emmanuel would say when Rose asked why he didn't come around much anymore. Emmanuel started meeting new people. Rich people. Important people. People who had never been poor or struggled like he had. These new friends lived in big houses and drove expensive cars. They went to fancy restaurants where one meal cost more than Rose spent on food in a whole month. At first, Emmanuel felt different around these people. He would remember his small house with Rose, her wheelchair, and their simple life. But slowly, Emmanuel began to feel embarrassed about where he came from. When his new rich friends asked about his family, Emmanuel would change the subject quickly. "Oh, my family is fine," he would say. "Let's talk about something else." Emmanuel started to feel like his past was holding him back. He wanted to fit in with these successful people. He wanted them to think he was just like them. One day Emmanuel met Patricia at a fancy party. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She wore expensive jewelry and designer clothes. Her father owned 3 big companies. Patricia liked Emmanuel too. He was handsome, smart, and successful. But Patricia came from a very different world than Emmanuel. Her family had always been rich. They lived in a mansion with servants and fancy cars. When Patricia started asking about Emmanuel's family, he got nervous. "Tell me about your parents," Patricia said one evening as they had dinner at an expensive restaurant. Emmanuel's heart started beating fast. He thought about Rose in her wheelchair, living in her small house with the old furniture. "My father died when I was young," Emmanuel said. This part was true. "Oh, I'm sorry," Patricia said. "What about your mother?" Emmanuel was quiet for a long time. He looked around the fancy restaurant with its crystal glasses and gold decorations. "My mother, she's not really part of my life anymore," Emmanuel lied. It was the first time Emmanuel had ever said something so terrible about Rose. But he felt like he had to say it. He was scared Patricia wouldn't like him if she knew the truth. Patricia nodded and smiled. "I understand. Some people just don't fit into our world." "Our world." Patricia said it like there were 2 different kinds of people, important people and everyone else. From that day on, Emmanuel started to think the same way. He started to believe that Rose didn't belong in his new life. When Patricia's family invited Emmanuel to their big house for dinner, he was amazed. The house was like a palace. There were beautiful paintings on the walls and flowers everywhere. Patricia's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, were very rich and powerful. They owned businesses all over the city. "Emmanuel," said Mr. Johnson, "Patricia has told us so much about you. We're impressed by how successful you've become." "Thank you, sir," Emmanuel said, feeling proud. "It's wonderful when young people rise above their circumstances," said Mrs. Johnson. "You must come from a very good family." Emmanuel felt his stomach drop. He thought about Rose again, probably at home in her wheelchair, waiting for him to call or visit. "Yes," Emmanuel lied again. "My family taught me the importance of success." The lies were getting easier to tell. Each time Emmanuel told one, it became harder to remember the truth about the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. After 6 months of dating, Emmanuel asked Patricia to marry him. She said yes, and both families began planning the biggest, most expensive wedding the city had ever seen. But there was one big problem Emmanuel had to solve. What would he do about Rose? Emmanuel knew that all of Patricia's rich friends and family would be at the wedding. Important business people, politicians, and wealthy families from all over the city would be there. He imagined Rose rolling into the fancy church in her old wheelchair. He thought about her simple clothes and her small, quiet voice. He pictured Patricia's family looking at Rose and asking questions. The thought made Emmanuel feel sick with shame. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emmanuel made a decision that would change everything. He drove to Rose's small house for the first time in over a month. Rose was so happy to see her son. She had been sewing a new red dress for the wedding. She wanted to look her best for Emmanuel's special day. "My beautiful boy," Rose said, rolling her wheelchair toward him with a big smile. "I've missed you so much." Emmanuel couldn't look her in the eyes. He sat down on her old couch and took a deep breath. "Mama, I need to talk to you about the wedding," Emmanuel said. "Oh yes," Rose said excitedly. "I can't wait. I bought fabric for a new dress. Is red your favorite color when you were little? And I've been practicing how to get my wheelchair up the church steps." Emmanuel's heart felt heavy, but he forced himself to continue. "Mama, I don't think you should come to the wedding," Emmanuel said quietly. Rose stopped smiling. She looked confused, like she didn't understand what Emmanuel had just said. "What do you mean, my son?" "The wedding is going to be very fancy. There will be very important people there. Rich people. Successful people," Emmanuel said, still not looking at her. "But I'm your mother," Rose said softly. "I should be there for your wedding day." Emmanuel finally looked up, and Rose could see something cold in his eyes that she had never seen before. "Mama, you don't understand. These people, they're not like us. They're not like you. They have money and power. They dress nicely and live in big houses." Rose felt like someone was squeezing her heart with their hands. "Emmanuel, I don't care about any of that. I just want to see my son get married." "But I care," Emmanuel said, his voice getting louder. "I've worked so hard to get where I am. I can't have you there, in your wheelchair, making me look embarrassed." The words hung in the air like poison. Rose couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Making you look embarrassed?" she whispered. "Yes." Emmanuel stood up, pacing around the small room. "Don't you see? You're disabled. You can't walk on your own. Look at where you live. Patricia's family has millions of dollars. What will they think when they see you?" Rose felt tears starting to come to her eyes, but she tried to stay strong. "They'll think that you have a mother who loves you," she said. "They'll think that you have a mother who worked hard to give you everything you have today." "No, they won't," Emmanuel said harshly. "They'll think I come from nothing. They'll think I don't belong in their world." "But you do come from nothing," Rose said, her voice shaking. "We had nothing and I worked day and night so you could have something better. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of." Emmanuel shook his head. "You don't understand. You've never been in my world. You don't know how these people think." Rose looked around her small house, the same house where she had helped Emmanuel with his homework every night. The same house where she had made him soup when he was sick. The same house where she had celebrated every one of his successes. "This is the house where I raised you," Rose said quietly. "This wheelchair is how I got around so I could work and pay for your school. These hands in my lap are the hands that worked day and night so you could have a better life." "And I appreciate that," Emmanuel said quickly. "But that was then. This is now. Things are different." "I'm not different," Rose said. "I'm still your mother. I still love you the same way I did when you were a little boy." Emmanuel walked toward the door. He couldn't look at the pain in his mother's eyes anymore. "I'm sorry, Mama, but you can't come to the wedding. It's better this way." Rose sat in her wheelchair watching her son walk toward the door. The son she had sacrificed everything for. The son she had worked 2 jobs for. The son she had gone without food for. "Emmanuel," she called out as he reached the door. He stopped but didn't turn around. "No matter what you say, no matter what you do, I will always be proud of you. And I will always love you." Emmanuel opened the door and walked out without saying another word. Rose sat alone in her small house, looking at the red dress she had been sewing for the wedding. She touched the soft fabric and made a decision of her own. A mother should be at her son's wedding, she said to herself. No matter what. Rose spent the whole week getting ready. She washed and pressed her red dress 3 times to make sure it was perfect. She practiced doing her hair in the mirror. She even put on a little bit of makeup, something she hardly ever did. On the morning of the wedding, Rose woke up early. Her hands were shaking as she got dressed, but she was determined to be there for Emmanuel. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. "You look good, Rose," she told herself. "Your son will be proud." Rose drove her small old car to the beautiful white church. She could see all the fancy cars in the parking lot, expensive cars that cost more than her house. As she rolled her wheelchair toward the church doors, Rose took a deep breath. She could hear music playing inside and see all the well-dressed people. When Rose entered the church, everything became quiet. All the rich people in their expensive clothes turned to stare at her. She felt nervous, but she smiled anyway. Rose looked toward the front of the church and saw Emmanuel standing there in his handsome black suit. Her heart filled with joy and pride. "My beautiful boy," she whispered to herself. But when Emmanuel saw his mother, his face changed completely. The happiness disappeared from his eyes. Instead, he looked angry and embarrassed. Rose felt confused. Why wasn't her son happy to see her? Emmanuel walked away from the altar, his footsteps loud on the church floor. Everyone watched as he marched toward Rose with a dark expression on his face. "What are you doing here?" Emmanuel's voice was sharp and angry. Rose's smile faded. "Emmanuel, I'm your mother. This is your wedding day. I told you not to come." His voice got louder. "Look around you. Do you see where we are? This is a place for important people. Rich people. Successful people." Rose felt her heart breaking. "But I'm your mother. I love you." "You're disabled?" Emmanuel said the word like it tasted bitter in his mouth. "You're poor. You sit in that wheelchair and you don't belong here with these people. You're making me look embarrassed." The church was completely silent. People held their phones up, recording everything. Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her dignity. "I will always love you, my son," she said quietly. She turned her wheelchair around and rolled slowly toward the doors. Every step of the way she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her and phones recording her pain. As Rose reached the church doors, she looked back one more time at Emmanuel. He was already walking back to Patricia, adjusting his tie like nothing had happened. "I love you, Emmanuel," Rose whispered even though he couldn't hear her. Then Rose rolled out of the church and into the bright sunlight, leaving behind the son she had given everything for. Outside the church, Rose sat in her wheelchair in the parking lot. She was crying now, all the tears she had held back inside the church. A kind old man who had been at the wedding came outside and saw her. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked gently. "I'm fine," Rose said, wiping her tears. I just wanted to see my son get married." The old man shook his head sadly. What that young man did in there was wrong. Very wrong. Rose looked up at him with tired eyes. "He's still my son. I still love him." The old man helped Rose get to her small old car. As she drove away from the church, Rose's heart was broken, but she whispered a prayer for Emmanuel. "Please help him remember who he really is," she said quietly. Back inside the church, the wedding ceremony continued, but everything felt different now. People whispered and pointed at Emmanuel. Some of the guests looked at him with disgust. Even Patricia's family seemed uncomfortable. Emmanuel tried to smile and pretend everything was fine, but his hands were shaking. His heart was beating fast. Deep down he knew he had done something terrible. "Let's just finish the ceremony," Patricia whispered to him. She looked angry and embarrassed too. The priest continued with the wedding, but even he seemed uncomfortable. He had never seen a groom treat his mother so cruelly before. When Emmanuel and Patricia kissed at the end of the ceremony, there wasn't much clapping. Usually weddings are full of joy and celebration. But this wedding felt cold and sad. After the ceremony, everyone went to the wedding reception at the fanciest hotel in the city. There was expensive food, beautiful flowers, and a big band playing music. Emmanuel thought the worst was over. He thought people would forget what happened and just enjoy the party. He was very wrong. During the reception, people kept pulling out their phones. They weren't taking pictures of the happy couple. Instead, they were watching something and showing it to their friends. Then they would look at Emmanuel and shake their heads. What are they looking at? Emmanuel asked his best man James. James looked uncomfortable. Emmanuel, you might want to sit down for this. James showed Emmanuel his phone. On the screen was a video with the title, Cruel Son Throws His Disabled Mother Out of His Wedding. Emmanuel's face went white as a sheet. The video already had thousands of views and it had only been posted 2 hours ago. Oh no, Emmanuel whispered, his voice barely audible. But it was already too late. The video was spreading across the internet like wildfire. People were sharing it on every social media platform they could find. The comments under the video were harsh and angry. What kind of monster treats his mother like this? This man has no heart. That poor woman in the wheelchair. She deserves so much better. I hope everyone sees what this cruel man did to his own mother. This makes me so angry. How could he be so mean? As the evening went on, more and more people at the reception were watching the video on their phones. Some guests even started leaving early because they felt so uncomfortable being around Emmanuel. By the end of the wedding reception, the video had been viewed over 100,000 times. And it was still growing every minute. Emmanuel and Patricia left for their honeymoon in New York City the next morning. Emmanuel thought that maybe if they left town, everything would calm down and people would forget about it. He had no idea how wrong he was. The internet never forgets. While Emmanuel and Patricia were enjoying fancy restaurants and Broadway shows in New York, the video was becoming more and more famous back home. News websites picked up the story. Blog writers wrote articles with titles like, The Son Who Humiliated His Disabled Mother, and Wedding Cruelty Goes Viral. Television shows started talking about it during their morning programs. Radio hosts discussed it on their shows, and listeners called in to share their angry opinions. I can't believe someone could be so heartless to their own mother, one caller said on the radio. That poor woman probably worked so hard to raise him, and this is how he treats her, said another. Everyone in the city knew Emmanuel's name now, but not for the reasons he had always dreamed of. He wanted to be famous for being successful and important. Instead, he was famous for being cruel to his disabled mother. Local newspapers put his picture on the front page with headlines like, City's Most Heartless Son, and The Man Who Broke His Mother's Heart. Even people who didn't know Emmanuel personally were talking about him in grocery stores, at work, and at church. Did you see that video of the man who threw his mother out of his wedding? They would ask each other. For 7 days, Emmanuel and Patricia enjoyed their expensive honeymoon. Emmanuel bought Patricia expensive jewelry and they ate at the best restaurants in New York City. They saw famous Broadway shows and stayed in a luxury hotel. Emmanuel felt happy and successful. He had married the woman of his dreams, and now they were living like rich, important people. He had no idea that back home his whole life was falling apart. But on their last day in New York, Patricia was looking at her phone when her face suddenly went pale. Emmanuel, she said, her voice shaking. You need to see this. Patricia showed Emmanuel her phone screen. There were hundreds of messages from her friends and family. All of them were about the video. Emmanuel, this video has been seen by over 2 million people, Patricia said, her face red with anger. 2 million. Everyone back home is talking about it. Emmanuel grabbed the phone and started reading the messages. Patricia, how could you marry such a cruel man? Your husband is all over the news. He's famous for being mean to his disabled mother. Girl, you need to see what people are saying about your new husband online. Emmanuel's hands started shaking as he read message after message. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. This can't be real, he whispered to himself. But it was very real. Patricia showed him more messages from her parents. Patricia, we are so embarrassed. Our friends are calling us asking how we let our daughter marry someone so heartless. You need to come home right now. Emmanuel tried to stay calm. Patricia, don't worry. When we get home I'll explain everything to everyone. They'll understand. But Patricia was getting more and more upset. Understand what, Emmanuel? That you threw your disabled mother out of our wedding? What is there to understand? She was embarrassing us in front of all those important people, Emmanuel said, but even as he said it, his voice didn't sound sure anymore. Patricia stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Emmanuel, that was your mother. The woman who raised you. And she's disabled. How could you be so cruel? The flight back home was very quiet. Emmanuel kept checking his phone, and each time he did, his face got paler and paler. The video now had over 3 million views. News websites from other countries were writing about it. People from all over the world were commenting on the story. "This is the worst son in the world," wrote someone from Canada. "I feel so sorry for that poor mother," wrote someone from England. "I hope this man learns his lesson," wrote someone from Australia. When their plane landed back home, Emmanuel thought maybe things would be better. Maybe people would move on to other news. But as soon as they got off the plane, people at the airport started pointing and whispering. "That's him," said a woman to her friend. "That's the man from the video." "The one who was mean to his disabled mother?" asked her friend. "Yes, that's him." Emmanuel put his head down and walked faster. Patricia walked beside him, but she looked very uncomfortable. When they got to their car, Emmanuel saw that someone had written words on it with soap. "Bad son," and "Your mother deserves better." "Oh no," Emmanuel said, his voice barely a whisper. The drive home was even worse. At every red light, people in other cars would point at them. Some people even took pictures. When they finally got to Emmanuel's apartment building, there was a big surprise waiting for them. Standing outside the building was a group of news reporters with cameras and microphones. As soon as they saw Emmanuel, they all rushed toward him. "Mr. Emmanuel, Mr. Emmanuel," they shouted. "Can you tell us why you treated your disabled mother so badly? Do you feel sorry for what you did? What do you want to say to your mother now?" Emmanuel tried to push through the crowd of reporters, but they followed him all the way to his apartment door. "No comment," Emmanuel shouted as he quickly unlocked his door and rushed inside with Patricia. But the reporters didn't go away. They stayed outside his building waiting. Emmanuel closed all the curtains in his apartment and sat down on his expensive couch. His hands were still shaking. "This will all go away soon," he told Patricia. "People will forget about it and move on to something else." But Patricia wasn't listening to him anymore. She was looking at her phone again, and her face was getting more and more upset. "Emmanuel," she said slowly, "my father just called me. He said that his business partners are asking him about the video. They don't want to work with our family anymore because of what you did." Emmanuel's face went completely white. Patricia's father was a very important businessman, and Emmanuel's job depended on having good relationships with people like him. "That can't be true," Emmanuel said, but his voice was very quiet. Just then Emmanuel's own phone started ringing. He looked at the screen and saw it was his boss, Mr. Johnson. Emmanuel answered the phone with a shaky voice. "Hello, Mr. Johnson." "Emmanuel," said Mr. Johnson, and his voice sounded very serious. "I need you to come to the office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to talk." Emmanuel's heart sank. He knew this couldn't be good news. That night, Emmanuel couldn't sleep at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see his mother's face when she was leaving the wedding. He could hear her soft voice saying, "I love you, my son." But then he would shake his head and tell himself, "No, I did the right thing. She would have embarrassed me in front of all those important people." Patricia slept in the guest bedroom that night. She said she needed time to think. The next morning, Emmanuel got dressed in his best suit and went to work. But as soon as he walked into the office building, everyone stopped talking and stared at him. The security guard at the front desk looked at him with disgust. The elevator was full of people, but no one wanted to stand next to him. When Emmanuel got to his office floor, his co-workers whispered and pointed at him. Some of them shook their heads sadly. "Good morning, everyone," Emmanuel said, trying to sound normal and confident. But no one said good morning back to him. Emmanuel's secretary, Mrs. Adams, looked at him with disappointed eyes. "Mr. Johnson wants to see you in his office right now," she said coldly. Emmanuel walked slowly to Mr. Johnson's office. With each step, his heart beat faster and faster. He knocked on the door. "Come in," said Mr. Johnson's voice. Emmanuel opened the door and saw Mr. Johnson sitting behind his big desk. Mr. Johnson's face looked very serious and disappointed. "Sit down, Emmanuel," Mr. Johnson said. Emmanuel sat down in the chair across from Mr. Johnson's desk. His hands were sweating. "Emmanuel," Mr. Johnson began, "I've been running this company for 25 years. In all that time, I have never been more disappointed in one of my employees." Emmanuel's face went pale. "Mr. Johnson, I can explain." "Explain what?" Mr. Johnson interrupted. "Explain how you treated your disabled mother like garbage at your own wedding? Explain how you made our company look bad because everyone knows you work here." Mr. Johnson turned his computer screen around so Emmanuel could see it. On the screen was the video of Emmanuel being cruel to his mother at the wedding. This video has been seen by over 4 million people now, Mr. Johnson said. 4 million people have watched you be cruel to the woman who raised you. And many of those people know you work for my company. Emmanuel tried to speak, but no words came out of his mouth. Our clients have been calling me all morning, Mr. Johnson continued. They're asking me how I can employ someone who treats his disabled mother so badly. They're saying they don't want to do business with a company that hires heartless people. Mr. Johnson, please, Emmanuel finally managed to say. I'm sorry, Emmanuel, Mr. Johnson said, shaking his head. I have to think about what's best for this company and all the other good people who work here. I can't have someone like you representing us. Mr. Johnson opened his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. You're fired, Emmanuel. Security will escort you out of the building. Clean out your desk and leave your company key card with Mrs. Adams. Emmanuel felt like the world was spinning around him. But Mr. Johnson, I've worked here for 5 years. I've made you so much money. I'm one of your best employees. You were one of my best employees, Mr. Johnson corrected him. But a man who treats his disabled mother with such cruelty is not the kind of person I want working for me. What you did was unforgivable. 2 security guards appeared at the office door. Gentlemen, please help Mr. Emmanuel clean out his desk and then escort him out of the building, Mr. Johnson said. Emmanuel stood up slowly. His legs felt like they were made of jelly. Please, Mr. Johnson. Give me another chance. But Mr. Johnson had already turned away from him and was looking at papers on his desk. Goodbye, Emmanuel. I hope you learn from this terrible mistake. The security guards walked Emmanuel to his desk. All of his co-workers watched as he packed his personal items into a cardboard box. No one said goodbye to him. No one wished him good luck. As Emmanuel walked out of the building carrying his box of belongings, he could hear people talking about him. That's the man from the video. Can you believe he was so mean to his disabled mother? I'm glad Mr. Johnson fired him. We don't need people like that working here. Emmanuel got in his car and sat there for a long time, staring at the office building where he used to work. Just yesterday he was a successful businessman with an important job and a bright future. Now he was unemployed and everyone in the city knew his face as the man who was cruel to his disabled mother. When Emmanuel finally drove home, he hoped Patricia would be there to comfort him. Even though she was angry, he thought she would understand that he needed her support now more than ever. But when he opened the door to their apartment, he found Patricia packing her clothes into suitcases. Patricia, what are you doing? Emmanuel asked, even though he could see exactly what she was doing. Patricia didn't look up from her packing. I'm leaving, Emmanuel. I can't stay married to you. But Patricia, we just got married. We promised to stay together forever, remember? For better or for worse. Patricia finally looked at him and her eyes were full of tears and anger. Emmanuel, I thought I knew who you were. But the man who threw his disabled mother out of his own wedding is not the man I fell in love with. Patricia, please don't leave me. I just lost my job. I need you now more than ever. You lost your job? Patricia stopped packing for a moment. Because of the video? Yes, because of the stupid video. Mr. Johnson said the company's reputation was being hurt because I work there. Patricia shook her head sadly. It's not a stupid video, Emmanuel. It's proof of who you really are inside. And I can't be married to someone who treats his own mother like that. Emmanuel sat down on the bed next to Patricia's suitcases. But I love you, Patricia. And you love me too, right? I thought I loved you, Patricia said quietly. But now I see that the man I loved was just pretending to be good. The real you is the man who was cruel to his disabled mother. Patricia, my mother embarrassed me. She came to our wedding in that old wheelchair wearing that cheap dress. What would people think of us? Patricia stopped packing again and stared at Emmanuel with shock. Emmanuel, do you hear yourself? That woman raised you all by herself after your father died. She worked so hard to give you everything you needed. And you're worried about what people would think of her cheap dress. But Patricia. No, Emmanuel, Patricia interrupted. I've made up my mind. My parents are right. I can't stay married to someone so heartless. What if we have children someday? How would you treat them if they ever disappointed you? This thought scared Emmanuel more than losing his job had. Patricia, I would never hurt our children. You hurt the woman who gave birth to you and raised you, Patricia said. If you can hurt her, you can hurt anyone. Patricia closed her last suitcase and looked around the apartment one more time. I'm going back to live with my parents, she said. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce papers. Divorce? Emmanuel felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Patricia, please don't say that word. Goodbye, Emmanuel, Patricia said as she picked up her suitcases. I hope someday you understand how wrong you were." And with that, Patricia walked out the door, leaving Emmanuel all alone in their expensive apartment. Emmanuel sat on his bed in complete silence. In just 2 days he had lost his job and his wife. All because of one moment at his wedding when he chose his pride over his mother's feelings. But Emmanuel still didn't want to admit he was wrong. He told himself that everyone else was being too sensitive. He told himself that Patricia and Mr. Johnson didn't understand how important it was to look successful in front of important people. The next few days were very hard for Emmanuel. He tried to find a new job, but every time he went for an interview the people interviewing him would recognize his face from the video. "Aren't you the man who was cruel to his disabled mother at his wedding?" they would ask. That was a misunderstanding, Emmanuel would try to explain. But no one wanted to hire him. Company after company turned him down. Emmanuel's friends stopped calling him. When he tried to call them they wouldn't answer their phones. His apartment felt bigger and lonelier every day. Without Patricia there, and without a job to go to, Emmanuel had nothing to do but think about what had happened. But he still refused to admit that he had been wrong to treat his mother that way. After 2 weeks of looking for work with no success, Emmanuel's landlord, Mr. Peterson, knocked on his door. "Emmanuel," Mr. Peterson said when Emmanuel opened the door, "we need to talk about your rent." "What about my rent?" Emmanuel asked. "I've always paid it on time." "Yes, but that was when you had a job," Mr. Peterson said. "I heard you got fired. And honestly, ever since that video of you went viral, my other tenants have been complaining. They don't want to live in the same building as you." Emmanuel's heart sank even lower. "But Mr. Peterson, I've been a good tenant for 3 years. I've never caused any problems." "That was before everyone in the city knew you as the man who threw his disabled mother out of his wedding," Mr. Peterson said sadly. "I'm sorry, Emmanuel, but I'm going to have to ask you to move out." "Move out? But where will I go? And I don't have a job right now, so I can't afford to pay for a moving truck or a new apartment." Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable, but he didn't change his mind. "I'll give you 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live." "I'm sorry, but that's final." After Mr. Peterson left, Emmanuel sat on his expensive couch and looked around his apartment. Soon he wouldn't even have this place to live. Emmanuel had saved some money from his old job, but without any income coming in, that money was disappearing fast. He still had to pay for food, his car, his phone, and all his other bills. Every day Emmanuel checked his email hoping to find a job offer. But instead he only found rejection letters. "Thank you for your interest in working for our company, but we have decided not to hire you. We feel that you would not be a good fit for our team. We are looking for someone with better character." Some companies were more direct. "We cannot hire someone who treats their disabled mother so cruelly." After 3 weeks of searching, Emmanuel had sent his resume to over 50 companies. Not a single one wanted to hire him. Emmanuel's savings were getting smaller and smaller. He had to stop buying expensive food and start shopping at the cheapest stores. He canceled his gym membership, his magazine subscriptions, and his premium TV channels. But even with all these cuts, his money was running out fast. One morning, Emmanuel woke up and realized he had been living like this for a whole month. A month without Patricia, a month without a job, a month of everyone in the city knowing his face as the cruel son. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. His expensive suits were wrinkled because he had no reason to iron them. His hair was messy because he hadn't been taking care of himself. His eyes looked tired and sad. For the first time since the wedding, Emmanuel started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had made a mistake. But then he shook his head. "No," he told himself. "Everyone else is overreacting. I'll find a job soon, and then everything will go back to normal." That afternoon, Emmanuel went to another job interview. This time it was for a much smaller company, and the job paid much less money than his old job. But Emmanuel was getting desperate. The interview seemed to be going well at first. The manager, Mrs. Williams, seemed to like his experience and his qualifications. "You have a very impressive resume, Emmanuel," Mrs. Williams said. "Your skills are exactly what we're looking for." Emmanuel started to feel hopeful for the first time in weeks. "However," Mrs. Williams continued, and Emmanuel's heart sank at that word, "I have to ask you about something I saw online." Emmanuel knew exactly what she was going to ask about. "Are you the Emmanuel from that wedding video? The one where you asked your disabled mother to leave your wedding?" Emmanuel's face turned red. He had hoped that maybe this small company hadn't heard about the video, but apparently everyone in the entire city knew about it. "That video doesn't show the whole story," Emmanuel said, trying to sound confident. "There were circumstances that people don't understand." Mrs. Williams looked at him with disappointed eyes. Mr. Emmanuel, what circumstances could possibly make it okay to treat your disabled mother that way? Emmanuel tried to think of an answer, but no words came out of his mouth. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams said, but we can't hire you. Our company values include respect for family and taking care of those who need help. Based on that video, you don't share those values. Emmanuel left that interview feeling more hopeless than ever. If even small companies wouldn't hire him, what was he going to do? That evening, Emmanuel sat in his apartment eating cheap noodles for dinner. His phone rang, and when he looked at the screen he saw it was his landlord again. Hello, Mr. Peterson, Emmanuel answered. Emmanuel, tomorrow is your last day, Mr. Peterson said. Do you have somewhere to go? Emmanuel looked around his apartment at all his expensive furniture and clothes. Not yet, Mr. Peterson. Can you give me a few more days? I'm sorry, but no. The moving truck will be here tomorrow afternoon to help you move out. If you don't have somewhere to go, you'll need to put your things in storage. After Mr. Peterson hung up, Emmanuel sat in his empty apartment and realized how alone he really was. He had no wife, no job, no friends, and now no home. He thought about calling his old friends, but he knew they wouldn't answer. He thought about calling Patricia, but she had made it clear that she never wanted to see him again. There was only one person left who might help him. But Emmanuel's pride was still too strong. He refused to even think about calling his mother. She's the reason all of this happened to me in the first place, Emmanuel told himself angrily. If she had just stayed home like I asked her to, none of this would have happened. The next day, Emmanuel packed all of his expensive clothes, his fancy watches, and his important papers into boxes. A storage truck came to take away his furniture and belongings. Emmanuel kept only 2 suitcases with clothes in his car. As he drove away from his apartment building for the last time, Emmanuel had no idea where he was going to sleep that night. He drove around the city for hours trying to think of what to do. All the hotels were too expensive for someone with no job and very little money left. Finally, as the sun was going down, Emmanuel parked his car in a parking lot behind a 24-hour restaurant. He pushed the front seats back and tried to sleep in his car. But sleeping in a car is not comfortable, especially for someone who was used to sleeping in an expensive bed with soft sheets. Emmanuel barely slept at all that first night. His back hurt, his neck was stiff, and he was cold. The next morning, Emmanuel washed his face in the restaurant's bathroom and bought a cheap cup of coffee and a small breakfast. He spent the day looking for jobs again, but it was the same story everywhere he went. As soon as people recognized him, they didn't want to hire him. That night, Emmanuel slept in his car again in a different parking lot. This continued for a whole week. Every night, Emmanuel would find a new place to park his car and try to sleep. Every day he would look for work and get rejected. Emmanuel's savings were almost gone. He could only afford to eat one small meal each day. His expensive clothes were getting dirty because he couldn't afford to wash them properly. One morning, Emmanuel looked at himself in a gas station bathroom mirror. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. His face was thin because he wasn't eating enough food. His clothes were wrinkled and dirty. His hair was messy and unwashed. He looked like a homeless person. Because that's exactly what he had become. That afternoon, while Emmanuel was sitting in his car trying to figure out what to do next, he saw something that made his heart stop. Through his car window he saw his mother. Rose was in her wheelchair outside a small grocery store. She was reaching up trying to get something from a high shelf, but she couldn't reach it. A kind stranger saw her struggling and helped her get what she needed. Rose smiled and thanked the stranger warmly. Emmanuel watched his mother from his car, and for the first time in weeks he really looked at her. She was wearing the same simple clothes she had always worn. Her wheelchair was old and needed repairs. But her face still had the same gentle, kind expression it had always had. Even after everything he had done to her, even after he had humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, she still looked like the loving mother who had raised him. Emmanuel started to remember things he had tried to forget. He remembered how his mother used to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to cook his breakfast before school. He remembered how she would walk for miles to save money on bus fare, just so she could buy him new school clothes. He remembered how she would stay up late helping him with his homework, even after working all day cleaning other people's houses. He remembered how she would skip her own meals to make sure he had enough food to eat. And he remembered the accident. Emmanuel remembered the night his mother came home late from work, walking slowly because she was tired. He remembered hearing the terrible sound of car brakes and then screaming. He remembered running outside and seeing his mother lying on the ground, unable to move her legs. He remembered holding her hand in the hospital while the doctor explained that she might never walk again. He remembered promising her that night, "Don't worry, Mama. When I grow up and become successful, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you never have to work so hard again." But instead of taking care of her, he had been ashamed of her. Instead of honoring her sacrifices, he had rejected her. Instead of showing the world how much he loved the woman who had given up everything for him, he had thrown her out of his wedding. For the first time since his wedding day, Emmanuel started to cry. He cried for his mother who had loved him so much and worked so hard for him. He cried for himself, because he had thrown away the most important person in his life for people who didn't really care about him. He cried because he finally understood what a terrible mistake he had made. Emmanuel watched through his tears as his mother finished her shopping and slowly wheeled herself toward the bus stop. She moved carefully, pushing her old wheelchair with her tired hands. Emmanuel wanted to run to her and help her. He wanted to tell her he was sorry and that he loved her. But he was too ashamed. "How can I face her after what I did?" Emmanuel thought to himself. "She probably hates me now. And she has every right to hate me." So Emmanuel just sat in his car and watched his mother get on the bus and ride away. That night, Emmanuel couldn't stop thinking about his mother. He couldn't sleep even though he was tired and cold in his car. All night long, he kept remembering more and more things about how much his mother had loved him and sacrificed for him. He remembered when he was 7 years old and got very sick. His mother stayed awake for 3 days and nights taking care of him, putting cool cloths on his forehead and giving him medicine. He remembered when he was 10 years old and really wanted a bicycle for his birthday. His mother worked extra hours for months, cleaning more houses and doing more work just to save enough money to buy him that bike. He remembered when he was in high school and wanted to go on an expensive school trip. His mother sold her only valuable possession, a gold necklace that had belonged to her own mother, to pay for his trip. And he remembered how happy she had looked at his graduation from college. She had tears of joy in her eyes as she watched him walk across the stage to get his diploma. "I'm so proud of you, my son," she had said that day. "All of our hard work was worth it." But Emmanuel had forgotten all of those memories when he became successful. He had been embarrassed by the woman who had given up everything for him. The next morning, Emmanuel woke up in his car feeling more alone than he had ever felt in his entire life. His phone battery was almost dead and he had no money left to buy food. His car was almost out of gas and he didn't have money to fill it up. Emmanuel realized that he had reached the bottom. He had lost everything: his job, his wife, his home, his friends, his money, and most importantly, his mother's love. But losing everything also meant that his pride was finally broken. For weeks, Emmanuel had been telling himself that everyone else was wrong and that he had done nothing bad. But now, sitting hungry and homeless in his car, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. "I was wrong," Emmanuel whispered to himself. "I was so wrong." Emmanuel thought about all the people who had tried to tell him he had made a mistake. His boss, his wife, the strangers on the internet, even his own wedding guests. They had all been right and he had been wrong. Emmanuel realized that the people he had chosen over his mother, Patricia, her wealthy family, his fancy friends, had all abandoned him as soon as he was no longer successful. But his mother, the woman he had rejected, had loved him even when he had nothing to offer her. She had loved him when he was just a poor boy with big dreams. "I threw away the only person who ever truly loved me," Emmanuel realized. Emmanuel knew what he had to do, but he was scared. He had to go to his mother and ask for her forgiveness. But what if she said no? What if she was so hurt by what he had done that she never wanted to see him again? Emmanuel was terrified that his mother would reject him the same way he had rejected her. But he also knew that he couldn't keep living this way, homeless, hungry, and alone. That afternoon, Emmanuel used the last bit of gas in his car to drive to his mother's neighborhood. Rose lived in a small, simple house in the oldest part of the city. It wasn't a fancy neighborhood like where Emmanuel used to live, but it was clean and safe. Emmanuel parked his car across the street from his mother's house and sat there for a long time, trying to get up the courage to knock on her door. The house looked the same as it always had. It was small and the paint was old, but Rose kept it very neat and tidy. There were flowers planted in small pots by the front door. Emmanuel could see his mother's wheelchair ramp leading up to the front porch. He remembered helping to build that ramp years ago, back when he still visited his mother regularly. That was before he became successful and started being ashamed of her simple house and simple life. Emmanuel sat in his car for over an hour, just staring at his mother's house and trying to decide what to say to her. Finally, just as the sun was starting to set, Emmanuel took a deep breath and got out of his car. His legs felt shaky as he walked across the street toward his mother's front door. Emmanuel walked very slowly up the wheelchair ramp to his mother's front porch. His step felt like it took forever. When he reached the front door, Emmanuel stood there for several more minutes. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. What if she doesn't want to see me? He worried. What if she's so angry that she tells me to go away? But Emmanuel knew he had to try. He raised his hand and knocked gently on the door. He heard his mother's voice from inside the house. Just a minute, please. Then he heard the sound of her wheelchair moving across the floor toward the door. Emmanuel's heart beat even faster. He hadn't heard his mother's voice in over 2 months, not since the wedding day when he had been so cruel to her. The door opened and there was Rose sitting in her wheelchair and looking up at her son. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just looked at each other. Emmanuel could see that his mother looked older and sadder than she had at the wedding. Her eyes looked tired, like she had been crying a lot. Rose could see that her son looked terrible. His clothes were dirty and wrinkled. His face was thin and pale. He looked like he hadn't eaten a good meal or slept in a real bed for a long time. Emmanuel? Rose said softly, her voice full of surprise and worry. My son, what happened to you? You look so sick and thin. Even after everything he had done to her, his mother's first concern was for his well-being. This made Emmanuel start crying again. Mama, he said, his voice shaking. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. Rose looked at her son standing on her porch, crying and looking so lost and broken. Despite everything that had happened, her heart filled with love and concern for him. Come inside, my son, she said gently. You look like you need food and rest. Emmanuel couldn't believe what he was hearing. After all the terrible things he had done, his mother was still being kind to him. But Mama, don't you hate me? Emmanuel asked through his tears. After what I did at the wedding. After how cruel I was to you. Rose looked at her son with eyes full of love. Emmanuel, you hurt me very badly that day. I won't lie to you, it was the most painful thing that has ever happened to me in my whole life. Emmanuel's heart broke hearing those words. But, Rose continued, you are my son. I carried you in my body for 9 months. I held you when you were a baby. I watched you take your first steps and say your first words. No matter what you do, no matter how much you hurt me, I will always love you. That's what mothers do. Emmanuel fell to his knees on his mother's porch and cried harder than he had ever cried in his life. I'm sorry, Mama, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Rose reached down from her wheelchair and put her hand on her son's head, the same way she used to do when he was a little boy and got hurt. I know you're sorry, my son, she said softly. Now come inside. You're home now. Emmanuel looked up at his mother through his tears. Home? But Mama, I don't deserve to come home. I threw you out of my wedding. I was ashamed of you. I chose other people over you and now they've all left me. That's why you need to come home, Rose said. When the world turns its back on you, family is all you have left. And I am your family, Emmanuel. I will always be your family. Rose wheeled her chair back to make room for Emmanuel to come inside. Besides, she said with a small, sad smile, you look like you haven't eaten a good meal in weeks. Your mama needs to take care of you. Emmanuel slowly stood up and followed his mother into her small house. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. It was clean and simple with old but comfortable furniture. On the walls were pictures of Emmanuel from when he was a baby all the way up to his college graduation. Emmanuel noticed that even the pictures from his wedding were still hanging on the wall. Despite everything that had happened, his mother had kept them up. Mama, why do you still have the wedding pictures up? Emmanuel asked. After what I did to you that day? Rose looked at the pictures and then at her son. Because that was still one of the most important days of your life. Even though you hurt me that day, I was still proud to see my son getting married. A mother's love doesn't disappear just because her child makes a mistake. Emmanuel sat down on his mother's old couch and looked around the simple house. After living in his expensive apartment for so long, he had forgotten how peaceful and warm his mother's house felt. Mama, Emmanuel said quietly, I lost everything. My job, my wife, my home, all my money. I've been sleeping in my car for over a week. I don't have anywhere else to go. Rose looked at her son with deep sadness and love. What happened, my son? Tell me everything. So Emmanuel told his mother the whole story. He told her about the viral video, about losing his job, about Patricia leaving him, about becoming homeless, and about how everyone in the city now knew him as the cruel son who threw his disabled mother out of his wedding. Rose listened quietly to every word, her heart breaking for her son even though he had hurt her so deeply. When Emmanuel finished his story, Rose was quiet for a long moment. Emmanuel, she finally said, do you understand now why what you did was so wrong? Emmanuel nodded, tears still flowing down his face. Yes, Mama. I understand everything now. You gave up your whole life for me. You sacrificed everything so I could have a better future. And when I finally became successful, instead of being grateful and taking care of you like I promised, I was ashamed of you. And why were you ashamed of me? Rose asked gently. Because I cared more about what rich people thought of me than I cared about the woman who loved me most in the world, Emmanuel said. I forgot that you made me who I am. Without your sacrifices, I never would have had any success at all. Rose reached over and took her son's hand. And what have you learned from losing everything? Emmanuel thought carefully before answering. I learned that the people I thought were important, Patricia, her family, my fancy friends, they only cared about me when I was successful and could do something for them. But you, Mama, you loved me when I had nothing. You loved me even when I was cruel to you. Real love isn't about money or status. It's about caring for someone no matter what. Rose squeezed her son's hand. That's right, my son. And I want you to remember that lesson for the rest of your life. Mama, can you ever forgive me? Emmanuel asked. I already have forgiven you, Rose said with tears in her eyes. The moment I saw you standing on my porch, looking so broken and sorry, I forgave you. That's what love does, it forgives. Emmanuel hugged his mother tightly. I promise, Mama, I will never be ashamed of you again. I will spend the rest of my life making up for what I did. I will take care of you the way I should have been doing all along. I know you will, Rose said, holding her son. Now let's get you fed and cleaned up. You're home now and we'll start over together. Over the next few weeks, Emmanuel moved back into his mother's small house. He helped her with cooking, cleaning, and shopping. He fixed things around the house that needed repair. He pushed her wheelchair when she needed to go places. And slowly, Emmanuel began to rebuild his life, but this time with humility and gratitude instead of pride and shame. It took many months, but eventually someone gave Emmanuel a chance at a new job. It wasn't a fancy job like his old one, but it was honest work and Emmanuel was grateful for it. His new boss had seen the viral video, but he had also seen how Emmanuel had changed. Everyone deserves a second chance if they've truly learned from their mistakes, his boss told him. Emmanuel never became as wealthy as he had been before, but he was happier than he had ever been in his life. He had learned that true success wasn't measured by money or status, but by love, family, and doing what's right. And every night, Emmanuel would sit with his mother and tell her about his day, grateful for her love and the second chance she had given him. Rose lived to see her son become the man she had always known he could be, not successful because of his money, but successful because of his character. And Emmanuel never forgot the most important lesson of his life, that a mother's love is the greatest treasure anyone can have, and that family is more valuable than all the wealth in the world. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.